access to daily needs. E-commerce is working. Non-essential e-commerce is working, which is interesting. Last 1 week.
So far, even we have not suffered, and my own building was sealed for 14 days. We had 2 positive cases. It's more of a
Wow.
psychological thing,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
it's so close to you. It's somewhere.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
so I had unfortunately to go to a hospital, personal reasons, and my Arogya Setu app says, you are in red zone. It's fully red. It's scary actually. Thank God I don't need to travel. They'll not let me travel.
So we have been in red zone for a very very long time.
You-
So,
You're used to
and
it.
when I go to Amazon or wherever I go to
Yeah,
order, they say no, we can't deliver. You're in red zone.
correct.
So now red is normal for me. Being a,
We are slightly better here.
I think we are now live on Facebook, and
Yeah,
it's also 4:30, so we should formally start it. Hmm.
great.
And just a second, I just need 1 second. So, hello and welcome to the fifth and final edition of our series of webinars on News is Undervalued, brought to you in association with ABP News. In last 4 weeks, we spoke to several senior industry people, experts who unanimously agreed that news is the genre that gained maximum viewership during COVID-19. Call it fear or anxiety, but each one of us have remained hooked to news more than ever in last 8-9 weeks. However, now that the lockdown is becoming the new normal and things have started to open up, we today have another expert, Mr. Ajay Gupta, CEO of Wavemaker India, from whom we would want to understand if news will be able to continue to hold to its popularity post-COVID era as well. Welcome to the show, Mr. Gupta.
Hi, Nazia. Hi. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Same here, same here. There's so much to learn and understand from you. So, sir, as you're aware of our discussion point today is news genre, and what we all have seen the BARC numbers. It has seen a 200% hike in viewership. However, what we have tried to discuss in all our webinars is that is the genre able to translate it into into revenue growth, in the sense, are they getting the price they deserve?
Yeah, yeah. No, so undoubtedly, news has certainly done extremely well in terms of viewership, and I think that is fairly well documented. I just want to set up a little bit of context to it. So, with people being at home, obviously. There is going to be a surfeit of, I mean, there's going to be a extra push towards media, and digital and television both have gained in this situation. We know that digital has gained by about 15%, but television in general has gained about 30% more viewership, which is basically 3.5 hours a day of television consumption has gone up to 4.5 hours a day. 3.5 hours a day already was very high. We were known for being a very strong television market because of that, but that is now at 4.5 hours a day, which is phenomenal. So, which are the genres which really gained? Like you said, news has doubled. Viewership on news has doubled. It was, I mean, I think the first 2 weeks of April was even more, one and a half,
200%, more than
200%.
200%.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But if you look at the average since the lockdown, it's at about it's about double. The other genre which has definitely benefited is cinema, movies,
Movies.
which is about 20-25% growth over the normal time. GAC has remained flat. It went down for a bit, and then the gods came and saved us, which is Ramayana and Mahabharat, and therefore the GAC channels came back on track, but they remained kind of flat. So, in general, definitely, without a doubt, news has been the beneficiary. Now, looking at whether it translated into into revenues for the channel. So April, like we all know, saw a lot of advertisers taking back spends. It was a dramatic drop, and there was about a 22% advertising secondage drop in the month. across all the genres compared to the pre-COVID times. I'm talking about Jan, February, and then the last year. But in the news channels, the drop was only about 10% in terms of secondage, and GECs dropped crazily, about 30% drop. In terms of revenues, though, there has been around a 50% drop for GECs, around a 20%, 25% drop for cinema, and news channels have only dropped by about 10%.
Okay.
So, in a sense, of the lot that were impacted, news actually managed to get away,
More
a
or
little
less.
little better than the others, and it was quite bad for the others.
Now, another thing that
Uh,
we've been discussing this for last 4 weeks, but now before we conclude, another thing that we want to understand is that how can they continue with this kind of viewership in long term, and what measures can they do to, I mean, this is of course unprecedented, and people
Absolutely, yeah,
are
yeah,
watching this, the same hike is not possible, but what kind of measures can news take to
yeah.
ensure that it becomes one of the front runners for most marketers, and people don't just invest in news when PM is making a speech or there's some breaking story or something,
That was
but
something else, right?
yeah, but consistently, because news is not priced as much
Mm,
as GEC or other a lot of other channels would be. So
yeah.
where is it lacking, and what measures can it take to kind of sustain this kind of a lead?
So, in normal times, news channels accounted for about 8% of the total viewership across the day. 8%. Now, with this growth, it's about 16 odd percent growth. That is phenomenal, obviously. And what are the few things that accounted for this growth? One is non-prime time viewership came up. So, like I said, about 20-30% growth in TV viewership. 50% growth was in non-prime time. So non-prime time definitely took the ceiling up. So that's one way it went up. The second thing that happened was women viewership came into news. I think it's a function of single TV households and also the general concern of everybody in the house with what is happening outside, which also caused a larger women viewership. So both put together has caused this 100% jump in total TV hours. Now, what are the things that are in control and not in control? So, one is favorable, which is not in control, is that news will continue to remain important because there's so much happening across the world, right? There's the global scene is hotting up, the Indian scene is hotting up, something or the other is constantly happening, and those kind of peaks, and we've been seeing those peaks happening, and those peaks are as good as any normal GAC good program. And so those will keep happening, and that will be a favorable impact which you have no control over. It's just something which is beneficial to the industry, to the news industry. And there's something which is not in your control, is the prime time, non-prime time piece, right? Because once people start going back to offices, the non-prime time viewership is bound to fall. And we have seen that in the green zone. So we were observing green zones with orange zones with red zones, and we can clearly see that there is a taper off in TRPs in the non-prime time in the green zones.
Okay.
And so we know for a fact that you cannot, it is not sustainable. Non-prime time viewership is definitely not sustainable. There is something else though, which is possibly in control, is the kind of programming. So is there programming that they could news channels could look at to widen their base? And now you've got the base with you in this COVID time, and it'll be there for about a month or two more to go. But is there programming where you can get the people who are not usual news suspects to come on board? So
You
which is
said
the
widen their base.
widen their base, which is like
So
women possibly. So if you have a show which is about celebrities possibly, something educational which is good for kids, across the day in some point of time, you may be able to start retaining the female viewer. And that could be a possible way to get more audiences, and also maybe the youngsters, by targeting, by getting a little bit of content about Bollywood or sports or something like that to
All of
get.
this they've been doing for a while. They have been coming up with programs. There is entertainment zone. There are programs that they've been trying to. You have that SAS Bahu or something on
Mhm.
a news channel. They have been trying to do all of these things, but
Yeah.
somehow is it that
So
there is too much of
so
fragmentation,
no, I'm
or
saying that but you use this opportunity when people are
okay,
already with you
to reinvent.
to reinvent and
Okay.
get them to get used to some kind of programming which is on the show. I think typical case study of what happened in 2000, right, when Star bounced with KBC. They used the KBC platform to
Okay.
do Kyun Ki, Kahani Ghar Ghar Ki. I remember, everything just went through the roof using KBC. So I'm saying use this opportunity similarly, the COVID opportunity to expand your base. So,
Okay, so now that you have some large chunk of viewers back,
yes.
who were perhaps earlier watching you, who are lost interest, and now that they're back, you must hold on to them
That's right.
by
That's right.
coming up with
Give
new
them
content.
some kind of content that encourages them to come back in normal times.
Okay.
I think that could be a possible solution.
So we are live on Facebook, we are live on YouTube, Twitter, and we invite questions from all of you. We already have, I also have many more questions to ask, but we already have a question from Mona Jain, who wants to ask you why agencies are not able to sell to advertisers the merit of presence on news for their campaign, and hence have dominant presence, and also not able to convince them to give fair price for the GVM GRP delivered, and like you said, that the genre added new audiences.
So to be fair, like I said, in normal times, news accounts for about 8% of the total viewership and has gone up to about 16%. We're also looking at the general ADEX numbers. So in terms of general ADEX, news gets about 10 to 12% of the total ADEX. So 12 as against 8 is definitely a favorable situation. And even in the COVID times, currently news accounts for about 20%, give or take a couple of numbers here and there, as against the 16% viewership share that I was talking about. So yes, certainly news is getting, a slightly favorable, benefit of the addicts. But yeah, I mean, if you were to say that there is a value in news, so I certainly respect the value that news is bringing to the table. It's
Why
it,
is it
it
only slightly? Why isn't it more? Why is it
correct.
only
So
slightly?
yeah. So finally, you're competing for what you're delivering eventually is, I mean, the way the market has been set up is that the currency is TRPs and CPRP, and that's what you're competing for. So eventually, it will all plateau out at a certain level. You cannot go beyond that. If you go beyond that, then the market equilibrium is affected. So finally, what a marketer is looking for is viewers, is consumers, and he's willing to pay a price for those consumers, right? And uh, you are in the marketplace, you are fighting against all the other genres and all the other channels, and eventually the channel that gives more viewers will benefit. And already there is a slight benefit to news, and expecting more than that, I think, is unreal, because eventually this is a market of people looking to buy eyeballs, buy viewers. So
Also, isn't it important that this was news was the only domain which was giving you fresh content
mm,
in these times of, because everyone else was just repeating old shows, etc. But the only fresh content was coming to the viewers was through news. So that did that also help them?
certainly, and like I was saying, hats off to them, because they were directly in the line of fire of COVID. People like us were hiding, in our houses, and you had reporters on the road going around, and so really a big thing on their part. And certainly because of that fresh viewership, no fresh content and new content that they were creating, the consumer move towards them. No, it's doubled. Doubled is not a joke, and tripled, like we said in the beginning of the COVID period. So certainly the viewer has moved towards them. Advertisers move with the viewers, and they have also moved. So like we said, it's 22%. So in that sense, yes, they have the efforts put in by the news channels in getting content out there has certainly helped them. I think the other thing they did very well was very smartly was the L bands and stuff that they did when Prime Minister Modi was addressing the nation. I think that was a smart thing to do. They made a lot of money, using those bands. Also, it was of value to the advertisers who got unprecedented TRPs. This was like the olden days of Doordarshan. That's the kind of TRPs that program got. So they have done that. They've also done a lot of sponsored shows with advertisers, and I think that has also helped them get a little bit more revenue. So they have been they've also been a little innovative, possibly in trying and getting other advertising options coming on board.
And
And
they've been perhaps the only people who have been going to office throughout the lockdown. So don't you think they did not deserve a premium? The impact option for today's time, and advertisers do pay premium for the same. Why is that news is not able to get the benefit of the same? And also, why are advertisers not really using the platform to engage with consumers through content integration with relevant communication? That's a good point. We all are at office. Okay, that's she just done. Yeah. You what?
I lost you, Nazia.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I can hear you. Something at my end, I
You
guess.
want me to read that question again
Yes.
that Mona has asked?
Yes, please.
So, Ajay, isn't news the impact option for today's time, and advertisers do pay premium for the same? Why
Uh-huh.
is that news is not able to get the benefit of the same? And also, why are advertisers not really using the platform to engage with consumers through content integration with relevant communication?
No, I think it's being used. One is impact. So impact was certainly the Prime Minister's speech. That was certainly very, very high impact. And that got the advertisers lined up and queued up to buy inventory on the speech, on the address. Apart from that, I have personally seen a lot of and been involved in a lot of like I was talking about sponsorships and special programs that advertisers have started doing on news, because they're seeing the value there. There are I mean, our advertisers itself, Wavemaker advertisers itself, have a couple of shows going on news channels, and I think the understanding is there that this is an opportunity, and we are moving in that direction. Yes, it takes time for everyone to come on board and start using the channel that way, and also for the channel to start making such offerings, create such products which we can sell. So I guess in time it will happen. I already see signs of one is impact programming getting its due, and the second is in terms of these non-FCT advertising monies are certainly going the news channels way.
Munish Shatre wants to know, news is right now at 15%
Hmm.
share, that used to be approximately 7%,
Hmm.
similar to what the numbers that you said. Since many new viewers have sampled news and they have been watching news for last 2 months, where do you think news genre will settle now? And what rate hike should be good for news?
Very interesting question. So difficult to predict. However, I mean, we can make some very basic predictions. Like I said, the 15% is on the back of three main things, right? Which is the non-prime time, is the women viewership, and the third is the general interest increase in news. So general interest increase in news will certainly, I think, remain for a while, and the non-prime time will certainly go away. So the 8% that we were used to should certainly go higher. And it will not be at the 15%, but I'm guessing it should be at about 10 at least. And depending on how well programming is adjusted to allow for a wider net of audience to come in, you can up it.
So roughly a 3-4% gain.
Yeah, it's possible. Yes, yes, between.
And you don't want to comment on the rate hike?
So rate hike, like I said, is dependent on is dependent on
So for
demand.
a 3 to 4% hike in
Certainly,
the
so if you look at our current times also, like I was saying, this 8% used to account for about 10% of ADEX, and the 15% is accounting for about 20% of ADEX. So, similarly, there would be an increase in the value. So if you're talking about a 10-12%, you're talking about a 18% ADEX share. So that will happen, but these are market forces, and that really
yeah, of course
is not
we can only
dependent
give
on.
estimations. We can't
Correct. Correct.
be sure of final numbers. So Sagar Bagalkar wants to know, since GEC are flattened and GRP's news have seen super hike,
Hmm.
but the rates what agencies are quoting are lesser than pre-COVID period. Isn't agencies are trying to be opportunists?
Opportunists, no. See, these are realities of the time, right? We know that advertising, in general, about 50% of the market has been wiped out because of these times. Now, given this situation, and given those advertisers who are actually investing money, they are also going through a tough time right now, right? It's not easy for them. Sales are definitely down. And even in spite of that, if advertising money is coming, then commensurate reduction in rate is required. This is one part of it. The other part of it is market forces, like I said. If demand is half right now, certainly the corresponding rates will get definitely impacted. So I think these are market realities, and really it's not about wanting to squeeze anyone, or wanting to be opportunistic and make some get take undue advantage of the situation. We are all sensitive to it, but I think everyone is trying to make the most of what is possible.
See, another subject that has come up in discussion every time we have had the seminar, webinar on news, is that fragmentation is a very big problem with news channels. Would you also want to talk about that?
So there are there are about 150 odd news channels across the country. I watch English news, and I go in and out between about 10 channels myself, depending on the noise levels in the channel. So, but even so, if I mean mathematically, a simple arithmetic suggests that in the 10 channels that I view, if there were only 5 channels, each channel would be double the share that they are currently. So obviously, I mean, it is a lot of fragmentation, and that is impacting. So when we are talking about a 15% share of total viewership, if there are 150 channels, it's divided amongst them, right? And if you've got a fewer channel base, obviously, arithmetically, it will be better off. But I guess there are some advantages of having news channels, launching news channels, right? And which is why there are so many of them there. But
No, but
yeah.
as somebody who's into media planning, what do you suggest? What is better, to have so many channels or have one good or maybe two good channels? I mean,
So
what
so
would you
for so
advise to your clients?
to my clients, whether I should go. See, actually, clients are not affected because clients will pay CPRPs depending on the viewership, and if there are 500 channels, 200 of them are doing well, they will buy on the 200 channels and get their viewership. So honestly, I don't think clients are affected. It's the channels who are affected. So if I were advising the bigger channels, I would say have fewer channels, because then you will get a larger share. But
Mm.
obviously, the smaller channel will come in and say, "Listen, I want a part of that share." So really, it's I mean, from the channel's perspective, from the media perspective, it's difficult to really control this. And like I said, clients are not affected. Clients will get viewers wherever they are.
No, but what I actually meant was that what is better for the industry also, to have too many channels, or is it better to have a few strong channels, with better credibility? Because credibility is again a problem with news these days.
Mm.
So when you have bigger networks, they are more credible. And fragmentation of course affects the bigger networks also, because the smaller ones do walk away with some part of their share. So what is better for the industry as a whole?
I think again this is perspective, depending on where you're
I mean,
looking
your
from.
perspective on it.
Uh, my perspective on it, honestly, as a professional, really, like I said, for me, I need to get the best for my clients, and I will get that irrespective of number of channels. As a person, as an individual, as on a personal level, yes, I would prefer fewer a bunch of channels, because of what you said. Credibility is important. There's so much news going around. There's so much WhatsApp news and so
Credibility
much
is not
YouTube.
important when they're advertising. I
No,
mean,
so
advertisers, they don't look to advertise on platforms or on channels that have more higher credibility value.
no, so certainly, and that's where the 200 out of the 500, as I just gave a number, that's where you will always go in a brand safe environment. You'll always go in an environment which is safe for your brand and for the consumer. So and these are rules that we know from digital, and they apply on television also. So if there are channels which are not doing what is honest and truthful, we will certainly not be recommending them to our clients.
We have 3 minutes, and we have one question by Mr. Nishant Gandhi. When there are so many free platforms to consume the same news and shorter attention span of viewers, how do advertisers ensure genuine eyeballs and conversions of their spends?
Ah, yes, there are a massive number of there is massive amount of news running around. So I know for a fact, this the YouTube news feed, which has very little credibility, is also available. So in that sense, there is a lot of news floating. But uh, for the television channels, we have our currency, which is TRPs, which is being done, by Bark, and giving us ratings. So that's the currency we follow, and we're looking at that, to look at the channels where we should invest our money. Yes, I'm sure it's getting affected a little bit, because people finally are spending time on another screen and looking at other kinds of news, which is not favorable possibly, and which is not appropriate. But then, from our point of view, we have a credible system of ratings, which we look at, and that's the way we invest our monies.
Also, see, Ajay, even if things start getting normal from, let's say, June or July onwards, it will take some time for GECs to start producing fresh content, right?
Mm,
So wherein news is already on, I mean, they did not take any break.
yes.
So how long do you think that this hike will continue for news?
The hike, we see that, June, most of June, I think, will still remain in a similar situation, and July onwards, we are all hoping that things will open.
And
Like
you
we,
also said that ADEX is getting better by every month. So that 10% gap also they'll cover. News will
uh,
cover the 10% loss that
no,
in
so
ADEX.
yeah, it should. So their viewership is certainly, up there. There might be a little bit of drop in the viewership, like I said, because of non-prime time going off the radar, and we've observed this in all the green zones, so that has come down. But yeah, inventory, as demand goes up, again the rates will start going up. It's market forces. So definitely, the gap might start reducing. Will likely start reducing, as we go ahead, with demand increasing gradually. It is bound to happen. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but I was actually trying to also understand that last few months, April was really bad. I mean, there was
Yes.
no ADEX, although they had high viewership, but then they were not able to convert it because of very low ADEX. Now
Yes.
that ADEX has started to improve marginally, and viewership is not going down in the similar, I mean, is
Yes.
ADEX and viewership ratio same, or is it somewhere they'll gain? I mean, finally now they will be able to gain as the ADEX picks up?
So, yes, I think ADEX, like we said, May is better than April, June looks better than May. So certainly demand is going up. From that perspective, they should be able to command a better price, and viewers will remain for a while. It
Hmm.
will peter down a bit, but it will still remain high there. So yes, it looks like they should have a better
So
June.
coming few months will be better than last few months
Should
for
be,
the news
should be,
job.
should be, should be. Who should be
Wherein
better for
GEC,
everybody actually.
yeah, hopefully, but like
Hopefully.
GEC and other, maybe for news and movies, GEC
Yes.
still will have to wait
Yeah, GC still
because
till
they
content
still
doesn't
can't
come back
come.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but till they don't get content back in place, it will be a little bit of a struggle, because the viewers will not come on board, uh, and that will be a
So,
challenge.
so hopefully our next webinar should be on news is valued now, because
Yes,
next few months are going to be even better than the months that have just gone by. So on that note, I think we have already exceeded the time limit. We were supposed to close it by 5. It's already 5:02. And what I have understood from Ajay today is that news can definitely continue to be on the top of the charts if it handles its programming a little more carefully, and continue to engage the new base that it has been able to get hold of during this COVID period. And also they should expect a 3 to 4% hike in their uh, I mean, going forward in their, what is the technical term that you used, in their total base. There'll be an increase of 3 to 4%, right?
yes, there will be.
So on, and the coming next few months are going to be better than the few months that just went by. So on that positive note, we are going to conclude this. We still have more questions, but I think we'll keep them for the next time. And on this positive note, we are going to conclude this webinar on news. And news is definitely going to be in news throughout 2020. Uh, so thanks, Ajay, for joining us. It's always pleasure speaking to you. Thank you very much for all of those who have shared questions with us. We couldn't take all the questions because we only got Ajay's half an hour today. Maybe we'll come again next time. Thank you so much for
Thank you,
this, for
Nazia.
your time and your effort. Thanks
Thank
again.
you for having me, Nazia. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.